Hey, welcome to Maya Body Mechanics 5, Lifting Weight and Balancing. Just like in the last class, or very similar to the last class, we're going to explore some of the timing and the posing that you'll need to convey to an audience that a character is lifting something heavy and then throwing it as far as he can. But we're also going to have him balance the weight as he's holding it. We'll also go over pairing constraints again and how to attach something to a character. Alright, so this is what we're going for today, something like this. Let's just make that bigger. Alright, so since this is the last body mechanics class, we're going to start to talk a little bit about acting for animation. Posing is one of the things we're going to talk about. In our next class, we're going to get into mood, posture, and posing for character animation. And we're going to start this off, because he's lifting something heavy, we'll just start him off in a heroic pose. So we'll have him anticipate, and then he'll reach down. He'll take a step and reach down, and we'll just have him take one try at it, really bringing those clavicles down, and it's pulling on his upper body, or he's pulling up on it. And then he's going to give it another try. And in my example here, I had him readjust his hands. That also helps. Just little things like that. Get a better grip on it for the second try, and then he'll go up quickly and recover. And then he'll take a step back and then give it a heave forward. And then again, recover. We're also going to do a little bit of offsetting with the arms. You can notice here at the end, the arms sort of move at different times and settle at different times, so that's always a good thing we want to put that into our animation. It just adds a little bit more realism and variety to the movement. Alright, so in this example, because the hands are going to be pinned to the block, we're going to go with the IK hands. Your file, they should always be set to IK, but if they're not, you just select the shoulders and switch it, the FK IK switch to 0 in your channel box. Let's get him into his first position, where maybe he's got his chest pumped out a little bit and his hands on his hips. So as usual, I'm going to work with the center of the body first. First thing I'm going to do is pose the root, and we'll work our way up the spine to the head. And we'll start him off looking at the block. So something like that to start. We'll spread his feet out. Don't be afraid to use those channel box virtual sliders. They're always handy when you want to move things back in Z or X oriented to the world. There you go. So something like that. So we'll hit our button to select all of our character, and we'll just key that on the timeline. And let's give it a 10 frame hold just for presentation. Okay, so we're going to have him grab this block now, but we'll just go into a little bit of an anticipation pose here. So let's give it 6 frames on the timeline, 5 or 6, something like that. So he's obviously gonna lunge down to pick this cube up. So we'll just have him move up a little bit. Maybe get him up on his toes a little bit. Alright, so something like that's fine for the anticipation pose. Most of it's with his hands. We are going to, we moved his body up a little bit and just brought him forward a little. Shifted his root up, so we get his pelvis and his head will move up a little bit, and get him onto his toes a little. And we just want to give him a little hop upwards and get his hands anticipating that grab. So I'll just key that. Every time I key a new pose, I always scrub over it in the timeline just to see how that plays out. It also allows me to think about what he's going to do next. So I'll scrub over it and think about what the next move is going to be. So in this case, he's going to lunge forward and grab onto the cube. So we have to think about our timing. I say about 6 frames or so. We did 6 frames for the anticipation pose. Now he doesn't move much, his hands move a little, so that's going to be a little bit faster because his hands move a lot more. So say we do 6 frames, we do the same amount of frames for him to go forward, but for him to get from this position to a crouch down position down here, he's moving a much further distance. But over the same amount of frames, that'll end up being a faster movement because he's moving a farther distance. Alright, so let's get him down. Just going to work with the root first as usual. And we'll get him forward. We're going to have him take a step, but for now we're just going to slide the foot forward and just bring it there to balance his body. Alright, so that's the center of the body. We have this nice C curve in the line of action. So we're going to grab the hands now and just place them where they need to be. Always make sure, you might have experienced this already, but make sure that when you're posing your character, we haven't actually keyed it on the timeline yet. You don't move anything on the timeline while you're posing. You will lose your pose. It'll snap back to the previous pose. So I'm just going to get the clavicles in here. He's reaching down, so his clavicles would be positioned forward. As I'm posing this, I'm realizing that I need the arms to be a little longer, but what I can do is just move the cube as I'm trying to position the arms, just to accommodate that right arm, and then we'll make the adjustment with the left. Every pose that you set, you should really be paying attention to just making the best pose possible, like you're creating a sculpture. Alright, so we're going to keep a slight bend in the arm. I think this is good for now. Let's key that pose. Alright, so let's see what we have. Alright, so before we go any further, we went from here right to there. So what I want to do is add a little breakdown pose in the middle, and it's just an extra key pose. Since I made these 6 frames apart, I'll just do one right in the center at 3 frames. And we'll just select everything, and we'll just set a keyframe there. What I want to do is just make sure that there's a nice arcing motion on the way down and give a bit of drag to his hands. So I'm going to scrub over that and see if I have an arc. I do actually. If you look at the top of his head as he moves down, you see this arcing motion. So you want to get that happening. You know what I'm going to do here is just offset the hands. So I'm just going to bring them up, make sure they don't lock like that. Let's just break the wrists a little bit. Something like that. Just have the hands anticipate the grab. And let's just key the whole character. We can actually maybe drag the head a little bit too. As he's lunging forward, the head might drag back a little. Alright, so let's scrub over that, see how that looks. Okay, so let's cushion this pose a little bit. Let's give it about a 4 frame cushion. So we'll just have him move down just a tiny bit more. And that'll give us a bit of a bend in the elbows. And what that also is going to do is act as an anticipation pose for the next pose. He's going to move up. Alright, so let's just set a key on that. Let's scrub over that, see how that looks. Okay, that knee's just moving way too much. Alright, so that's a nice little cushion. So I'm just going to extend that cushion a little bit. Let's make it 6 frames. And we can bring the head down a little bit more. Because in the next pose he's going to lift his head straight up. So 6 frame cushion, and then we're going to give it 2 frames. So this will be a really quick movement. And working with the root, we're going to have him bear up really hard as he can. And because what he wants to do is he wants to go up, he's trying to lift this thing, so we'll have him actually kind of look up a little bit. It's just what we naturally tend to do. want to try and look up. Oh, it's a little exaggerated, but it's okay. And we'll key that pose. So that's 2 frames. So this is his first attempt at lifting. We're going to give this a 10 frame cushion. So almost half a second, and so you can see the variation in timing here. We have 2 frames for this, and then we're going to have him cushion into that, or actually just ease. We're going to ease it out a little bit and just move him a little more, just to get him to struggle and continue trying to pull up. And we'll just let his hands slip a little bit. That's okay. And continue with the head trying to look up. We'll just bring in the spread on the fingers. Key that. Now let's have a look at everything. Okay, I'm just going to slide those hand keys over to the previous frame. So I'll get the middle mouse button to copy it and slide it and drag over, release, and S. So we want that to happen there with the hand over those 2 frames. So this is the struggle. Okay, so far we have him standing. He anticipates a little bit and lunges down for the grasp. And then cushion, first attempt, and then we'll go right into a second attempt. We're going to just sort of anticipate a second grasp. So we'll go about 4 frames. Whenever a character is going to grab something, it's always a great idea to get the hands, to get the fingers spread out. So we want to have an anticipation pose, but we want to anticipate every part of the body, even the fingers. And you can vary it up a little bit so they're not all the same. Okay, so most of this anticipation is really just coming with the hands. The hands just getting ready to re-grasp it and get a better grip. For the next pose, I'm going to continue his downward movement with the root. And we'll get him hunched over a little more. And now let's go with the better grip. Okay, so leave his arms bent a little bit because on the next pose he's going to pull up really hard and his arms are going to straighten out at that point. So let's key this pose, and this will be a quick movement on the way up. And just like his first attempt, we'll get him to look up a little. And let's key that and see how it looks. I want to keep his hand like this. We don't want it to rotate. So I'm just going to copy it from this key by middle mouse button clicking and dragging over to this key and pressing S. There we go. Now it's pinned. All right. So at this point, this is the key that this is the keyframe that we're going to actually do the constraint, and we're going to constrain it to this hand, the one that's showing on the camera side. So let's actually go into the outliner for a minute and take a look at what nodes we have. Okay. So we have heavy cube move, and then we have heavy cube constrain. So use the constrain node. So what you want to do is select the hand, hold shift down, and then select heavy cube constrain in the outliner. And then we'll go to constrain and parent constraint. You can go to the option box and just double check to make sure that the maintain offset is check marked. And then we can just go apply. And now when you select the hand, the cube should be attached to it. So now you can't animate on anything on this heavy cube constraint node because the translate and rotates are attached to the constraint. So we can use this if you look in the outliner. When we go to animate this box later, we'll use the heavy cube move node. And this one you can animate on it. Now we can continue with our character animation. And we should probably take a mental note that the constraint kicks in at frame 51. Go down underneath shapes. It says heavy cube constraint parent. And you have this channel here. You want to key that and make sure it should be already set to 1. You always want to key it. 1 is on. 1 means the constraint is on and 0 is off. So you always want to constrain it when it's on 1 when you first set the constraint. Don't set it to 0 until you've actually keyed it. And then go back 1 frame. Then set it to 0 and then key it again. That way it's off for everything right up to frame 51 and then it turns on. Let's get him up about halfway. Let's say about 5 frames or so. This part won't be it'll be quick, but it won't be that quick because gravity's taking effect. The cube is obviously very heavy, or we have to convey that to the audience that the cube is heavy. So we don't want him going up too quick because it'll seem too light. Let's get him up about halfway. A great way to convey this to an audience is to put a lot of drag on the upper body. So his legs are doing most of the work. So we already got his root up pretty high. Let's bring him back. So he pushes off with this leg for the most part. So turn off the roll and we'll just get his foot up, his heel up. We'll keep this leg straight to show that he's pushing off with this leg. And we'll get that hand up. And we'll keep the arms completely straight so that it looks like the weight of the cube is bearing down. Okay, so for the spine, I'm actually going to bring the lower spine up a little bit. The legs are doing most of the work, but the upper and lower back the back is also doing a lot of the work. So, but I think in this example, because the arms are up at the top of the body, we're going to put more of a bend in the upper back. And just bring those hands back up, and let's key that. So you can see he's pushing off with his bottom foot. I don't know if I like him pushing off on the heel like that. We'll just keep that foot pinned. I just copied the key on the foot from 1 frame to the previous one so it stays pinned. Alright, so now we can have him take a step back and finish straightening out. Because he's putting in so much effort to lift this weight, the momentum is going to carry him back. But first he's going to go up and then settle. Probably catch himself with one of his feet. So let's just do that really quick. Okay, so my next pose is going to be more straightened out, and because he's lifting this box in an upward direction, we'll have him straighten out, and the cube will be up, probably up over his chin, and then we'll have him settle and rest the cube in his chest. Alright, so we have the center of his body all posed out in his legs. And then we're going to bring the cube up here. So that's what the momentum brought the cube. The momentum of the lifting action. Okay, so we'll key that. Alright, so now we have him going up, takes a step. I'm just going to fix that step now. I don't know why I like to just fix the steps right away. Even though we're blocking and we're not really messing around with curves just yet. Because it's just so quick, you just break the tangents and bring it up in the middle. So we'll finesse that further later. I just like to get that step put in where the foot leaves the ground, just so it's not sliding. Just looks too wrong. The momentum just from the lifting action carried him up, and now we're going to have him kind of settle back a little bit. And we can give a few more frames for that because it'll be a little bit of a slower motion. So we're just going to bring him down and back. So we want to make sure, we wouldn't want to pose him this way because it looks like he's going to fall over, right? Because there's nothing supporting underneath his pelvis here. Unless we brought his foot back, that would help him balance his body. You'd have to bring his foot back at least even to the base of his neck. That's because this is his center of gravity. if you bring it back, this throws off his center of gravity and it's unbalanced, right? So either we bring his foot back now, which we can do, or we just don't bring him back as far. We keep him more like this. I think I'll do that now because I'm thinking that I want to bring his foot back later to launch the block. So we'll just have him come down a little bit, and maybe we'll arch his spine a little more. As the block comes down, he's gonna put his weight into it. I'm gonna have him keep his chest out though, because he's gonna rest this cube into his chest. Okay, so that's looking okay. We'll key that. Alright, so he's lifted it. The momentum from lifting has brought him up. The block went up with the momentum, and then the weight takes effect and brings him down. Now he's going to get ready to throw it. If you're about to throw something, you need to brace yourself from behind to shift the energy forward. So we'll have him take a step back, and that step back will create energy from his leg muscles, the muscles in his legs. It'll create energy for him to throw this heavy block forward. So we should have this after he goes into this position. The weight's bearing down on him. We should have a little bit of recover time and just give him a bit of an ease. So let's give it 5 or 6 frames, and we'll just bring him down a little bit more. I think with this rig we can grab both hands and then shift select the root and just use the channel box, translate wide, just bring them down, and then we can grab both hands. Whoops. Shift select both hands and we can bring those down a little, just so the weight's taking effect. And we'll just move his head a little bit, and we'll key that. So there's our ease. Alright, so the weight's taking him back down, and then he's gaining a little bit more control over it, and then we'll give it 4 frames to cock his leg back. I'm just going to key that. So we just got his leg, we should put some movement on his body as well. So now that he's got his leg back, we have an opportunity to move his entire body back because center of gravity has changed. So he can afford to do this now. He's not going to fall over because he's placed his foot back behind him. We'll just put it back a little more. So this is going to be an anticipation for the toss. So we're going to do a pretty good anticipation pose, and we'll just get rid of that roll on the foot. Okay, so let's key that anticipation pose and just have a look at it. Okay, let's bring him down a little bit. Okay, and I'll just complete the step on this foot, or at least rough it in. Okay, so later when we refine this, what we could do is we can have that step happen a little bit earlier, just so the foot's already in place before his body moves back all the way. Alright, so now we can go right from the anticipation pose to, I'll call it a launch pose again. He's not launching his body, he's launching the cube. So we're going to go right to the point where his arms are extended out as far as possible. We're going to angle his whole line of action in this direction. He's just going to put all the energy in his body, push off, and just shoot it straight forward. This will be a quick movement, so we're only going to give it 2 frames. So this is a very quick movement. You can see the space between this pose and this pose. He goes a very far distance, but it's only happening over 2 frames. So it ends up being a really fast movement. And then now this is the point where we will disconnect or turn off the parent constraint on our cube. Just select something on the mannequin and make sure you're right on the frame where his last key pose is. So in my case it's on 77. Select the box. So here we'll key it at 1 because it's still constrained. Then we'll go to 78, just go to the next frame over and then change it to 0, and you'll see it'll drop back to its original position, and then key it. Between 77 and 78 it shuts off. So what we want to do is go to our heavy cube move, just select the heavy cube move and key it at 77, key it at 78, and then on 78 we'll actually move it back to where it was. I'm just going to give it a key, put it in the general direction and give it a key for now. Okay, so let's get it into that very close position that it was right before we shut off the constraint. 77 it's still on, the constraint is at 1. Then 78 we keyed it to 0. And now we're using the heavy cube move. Things are moving really fast at this point, so we can actually bring it away from his hands. And his hands don't control the cube anymore. The constraint's off at this point on this frame. So we can fix his hands and change his hands. And we're just animating that heavy cube move right now. So if we scrub over that, just make sure it's going in the direction that he tossed it. And it seems to make sense. It's at the right angle. Okay, so let's just go with that. So you can see over these 2 frames, this is where the parent constraint shuts off. And I just had the cube move out a little bit because if you drag over the frames before that, you can see the distance that it moves over those 2 frames. It's about that much distance. On that one frame where we had the constraint shut off, we can animate it about that distance. You can see I animated it about that far. From here on in, we can animate the cube on its own. We'll just animate the rest of the fall and bounce off the ground. But we'll just shut it off for now, and we'll finish animating our character first. Okay, so this is a quick movement. He's still gonna, momentum's still gonna bring him forward, so I'm just gonna give it another 3 frames. Just bring him forward a little more. We want to keep this leg back because it's keeping his center of gravity balanced. We really want to keep that back as far as we can. It's what's keeping him from falling forward. Alright, so let's get those hands straight out. He just tossed the cube. So the momentum of throwing the cube forward would cause his hands to continue to move forward. And now let's contrast those spread out hands with some closed hands. I'm actually just going to zero everything out here. And then we'll pose the fingers. Alright, so I want to get something like this. This really helps the action of throwing read, the after effect of what the hands would do. So let's get those fingers nice and straight. And make sure we have a silhouetted pose. A little bit of movement on the head. He just lunged forward, so the head's going to continue to move in that direction. And we'll just key that. Just scrub over. At this point the block's going to be over here somewhere, so we'll just shut that off for now. Alright, so after this he's going to start losing balance, so he's going to have to get his balance back really quick. And the way he's going to do that is to put his foot down. So that'll be a pretty quick movement because he doesn't want to fall. So what he's going to do is shift his hips back, go down, and then his foot's going to have to start to come forward. And already he's saved himself here. And we'll put a bit of overlap on the head. Actually, we'll overlap the entire upper body. That could be 3 frames actually, and then we'll start to settle. So just like the recover after he pushed the cube in the last session, we want to get this arcing motion for him to recover and settle over this pose and then the next one. We want to get him dipping down and then recovering straight up. So we already have the dip down, and then we're going to have him come straight up, and we'll give that a good 10 frames or so, and then we'll cushion it. I'm going to reuse this pose, so we'll select the entire mannequin and copy this pose right to the end. Now hopefully the foot stayed planted. Yep, we didn't move that foot. Okay, and you can see if you watch the head after he launches the cube out, if you watch the head you'll see this dipping action. Okay, so it's not totally an arc, it's a nice dip and then it comes up, but we can refine that in the graph editor by usually refining just the root would probably do it. Okay, so I actually don't want to have him in the same heroic pose that we did at the beginning. Let's just put him in something different, just to give a little bit of variety. We'll just keep it there for now, and we'll key that. And now we're just going to put a little bit of a cushion on this. We'll give it maybe 5 frames or so, and just give him a slight bit movement in the same direction he was going in. Just a touch. Alright, just so you get a tiny bit of movement. And let's give ourselves a 10 frame hold at the end. So that's enough. It's not quite 10 frames, but and then we'll key this. We're pretty much done our blocking. Now let's animate this cube. Alright, so I'm going to give it 3 frames. Give it 3 frames to get to here. And we'll just give it a bit of rotation. Give it another 3 frames. We'll give it a little bit more recent rotation. And now that it's heading toward the ground, it'll be quick. So we'll just give it 2 frames. We can have it fall something like this. Actually, it starts to rotate toward us, and we'll keep that rotation going. So we'll just actually rotate it the opposite way. So over those 2 frames, I want it to actually hit the ground. I'm going to give it a bounce and have it continue moving in the direction it was thrown. And back down again, and we'll just make it even with the ground. And it should continue moving in the direction it was thrown just a little bit, and then we'll have it slide. Just a very small slide. Alright, so we'll just spline all that. And then the last frame should be flat. We want it to ease into that, and actually this bounce, so for the rotate Y, we'll make those linear. So the top of the bounce can be flat and these can be linear, just so that it pops up in Y. Could even break this tangent if you wanted to, just to get a nice arcing motion on it. I can tweak this out a lot more and finesse it, but for the purpose of this demonstration, we'll just leave that as it is. You guys can finesse that further. You pretty much have this one finished. Okay, so the only thing I really would like to add is just a nice touch to your animation is including some offset to some of the extremities, or some of his arms in this case, and his legs. Obviously, when he's grasping the block, nothing's gonna offset so much. But after he throws it, I would definitely offset some of these arm movements here. And obviously mine too, it's the wrist is flipping around, so we would avoid that as well. But when we're done, when we've finessed all of our work, what we could do and what we should do, you can grab some of the keys on the arms, say for this whole movement, and you can shift them. We want to try to stay away from shifting keys around too much, but at the end usually I will shift some keys. And we get his arm locking there, so you can go to the graph editor, and we know that's the translation Z. So we can just bend that back so it happens a little later. There. So that way we have the arms, the left arm is settling after the right arm. And that's always a nice touch. Also, I was mentioning earlier this foot, his left foot here, that's helping him to maintain his balance, his center of gravity. And you can draw a line through him. You can see his center of gravity is right through here. And it should be an equal distance on each side. So he's got that much going on with his pose on this side, and then he's got about an equal amount on the other side. So that balances him. It's a very similar thing with if you look at the anatomy of a dinosaur, they'll usually have these huge bodies, and then the tails are usually also enormous to balance the other side of their body. When he does launch the cube forward, he's going to want to get his leg forward as quickly as possible. And what you could do is just shift that leg over a little bit, or have it move forward earlier. So you can grab all these keys and just maybe slide them forward. Try doing it one frame at first, just so that the leg's moving independently of the rest of the body. It just adds a nice touch and gets the leg where it needs to be earlier. And I wouldn't have it slide like that either. You want to have it planted a little earlier. So what we could do is just grab this key, and that way this leg helps to create energy to lift his body back up too. So when you're done, when you've finessed everything, you will want to go through and just slide the odd arm or leg control around just to create a little bit of offset. I'm just looking at this hand, I want to fix that. So just by bending some of these curves, we can get some overlapping action on the hand. Or if that's not working for you, you can always set another key. I'm going to go through and make sure that the feet tangents remain flat when his feet are planted. Check your animation. So play blast often. As you're looking at your play blast and you're checking your animation and scrubbing through the timeline, you have to identify which control is causing the problem. So say, for example, it's the root control that you want to change. So you have to identify which control it is, and then really you have to identify which channel it is. So you have to think about, well, if he's not dipping down far enough, well, it's the translate Y on the root, right? So you need his whole body to dip down further. So think about that as you're looking at your play blast and trying to identify what you want to change. It's basically you have to identify the control and what channel the problem is occurring on.